July 16, 1918. Midnight. Yekaterinburg, Russia. A knock on the door wakes the sleeping family. Get dressed quickly. Pack only essentials. There's unrest in the city. We're moving you to a safer location. The imperial family complies, having grown accustomed to sudden relocations. The sickly 13-year-old boy is carried by his father. A mother and 4 daughters follow, along with their loyal doctor and 3 servants. Down narrow stairs they go, led through dimly lit corridors. The guard directs them into a small basement room, plain, windowless, claustrophobic. The door closes behind them. They wait, confused. Why this empty room? Why the middle of the night? Another door opens. 11 men enter, revolvers in hand. The royal family thought they were being moved. Instead, they were being led to a basement with a firing squad already waiting. This wasn't just an execution, it was erasure. The methodical elimination of a 300-year dynasty and the desperate attempt to make them vanish from history itself. To understand how the most powerful royal family in the world ended up in that basement, we need to go back to the beginning of their downfall. Tsar Nicholas II ruled over the Russian Empire, a vast territory spanning 1/6 of the Earth's land surface, home to over 150 million people. His word was law. His family lived in unimaginable opulence, with palaces in St. Petersburg, Moscow, Crimea, and Poland. Their private train was more luxurious than most people's homes. Their collection of Fabergé eggs alone was worth more than the annual income of entire provinces. But beneath this glittering surface, Russia was a powder keg. Industrialization had created a new urban working class living in miserable conditions. Millions of peasants still existed in near-medieval poverty. Defeat in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905 had already triggered one revolution, forcing Nicholas to create Russia's first parliament, a concession he immediately worked to undermine. When World War I erupted in 1914, Russia was woefully unprepared. Military defeats mounted, and millions of Russian soldiers died. Food shortages became commonplace. Nicholas decided to take personal command of the armies, leaving the government in the hands of his wife, Alexandra. Alexandra, a German-born princess and granddaughter of Queen Victoria, had never been popular with the Russian people. Shy and reserved, she was viewed as cold and foreign. Worse, she had fallen under the influence of Grigory Rasputin, a Siberian mystic who seemed able to ease the suffering of her hemophiliac son, Alexei. Rasputin's growing control over government appointments created scandal after scandal. By February 1917, the situation had become untenable. Bread riots in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, quickly evolved into revolution, and military units joined the uprising rather than suppressing it. Nicholas, isolated at military headquarters, was forced to abdicate on March 15, 1917. The 304-year Romanov dynasty appeared to end with a whimper, not a bang. Initially, the provisional government that replaced the monarchy assured Nicholas that his family would be protected. The Romanovs were placed under house arrest at the Alexandra Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children, Olga, 22, Tatiana, 21, Maria, 19, Anastasia, 16, and Alexei, 13, still lived in relative comfort, though under guard. But Russia's revolution wasn't finished. In October 1917, Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power, promising peace, land, and bread to a war-weary population. This second revolution transformed the Romanovs' situation dramatically. No longer were they deposed royals to be protected. They were now symbols of the hated old regime that needed to be eliminated. As Russia descended into civil war between the Communist Red Army and the anti-Communist White Army, the Romanovs became pawns in a deadly game. In April 1918, they were moved to Tobolsk in Siberia, ostensibly for their safety. But as the White Army gained ground, a more secure location was deemed necessary. In late April, the family was transferred to Yekaterinburg, a Bolshevik stronghold deep in the Ural Mountains. There, in a requisition merchant's house, the final chapter of the Romanov story would unfold. The Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg, grandly renamed the House of Special Purpose by Bolshevik authorities, became the Romanovs' prison, and ultimately, their tomb. The 2-story mansion had been transformed into a fortress-like detention center. A high wooden palisade obscured it from public view. Windows were whitewashed to prevent anyone from seeing in, or the family from seeing out. Life inside grew increasingly restricted. The family was confined primarily to the upper floor. Their personal belongings had been confiscated. They slept on military cots without pillows. Guards monitored them continuously, even when they used the bathroom. The rules, posted prominently, dictated every aspect of their existence. The prisoners are forbidden to communicate with the guards or approach the windows. The prisoners may not speak any language other than Russian. All correspondence will be conducted only in Russian and will be inspected. The prisoners are permitted one daily walk in the garden, not to exceed 15 minutes. The family's isolation was nearly complete, and the outside world receded from their reality. A calculated decision by their captors to cut them off from potential sympathizers. The Romanovs' guards, primarily local Bolsheviks with a hatred of the aristocracy, subjected them to various humiliations. Some drew obscene cartoons on the walls depicting the former empress and her daughters. The family was forbidden to lock their doors, even while sleeping or changing clothes. Despite these hardships, Nicholas maintained his composure, recording the monotonous days in his diary. Another hot day. We took our walk in the morning and afternoon, read, played bezik with Alexei. Alexandra turned increasingly to religion, reading her Bible and praying for hours each day. The girls, once among the most eligible royal princesses in Europe, spent their time sewing, reading, or playing games with their brother. What the family didn't know was that their fate was already being decided in coded telegrams between Yekaterinburg and Moscow. As White Army forces advanced toward the city, local Bolshevik leader Yakov Yurovsky received new instructions and began making preparations. On July 15th, one mysterious change occurred. Father Storojev, who had been permitted to conduct religious services for the family, was told his services would no longer be needed. The following day, most of the regular guards were replaced with new men personally selected by Yurovsky, men who would follow orders without question. That evening, the Romanovs went through their normal routines, unaware that they were living their final hours. Alexei played with his spaniel, Joy. The girls discussed a book they'd been reading. Nicholas read aloud to Alexandra. They retired to bed around 10:30 p.m., perhaps wondering what the next day would bring. They couldn't have imagined what was being prepared just below them, in the basement of the house. As the Romanovs slept on the night of July 16th, the atmosphere in the Ipatiev house changed dramatically. Most of the regular guards had been dismissed. Yakov Yurovsky, the commandant, brought in a special squad, a mix of Bolsheviks and Hungarian prisoners of war, and positioned them strategically throughout the building. In the basement, Yurovsky selected a room at the end of a corridor, a former storage area with thick walls that would muffle sound. He made a mental note of a peculiar feature. The room had a brick wall rather than a wooden one, which would prevent bullets from passing through into neighboring houses. Around midnight, Yurovsky awakened Dr. Eugene Botkin, the family's physician, instructing him to rouse the Romanovs. The excuse was convincing. White Army forces were approaching the city, artillery fire had been heard, and for their safety, the family needed to be moved to the basement until transportation could be arranged. This was not an unusual request. The family had been moved multiple times over the previous year, often with little notice. They had no reason to suspect this relocation was different from the others. Nicholas woke his wife and children. Alexei, suffering from a recent hemophilia episode, couldn't walk, so his father carried him. The family dressed quickly, but didn't pack many belongings, believing this to be a temporary move within the house. Led by Yurovsky and guards with lanterns, they descended the narrow staircase to the lower level, a part of the house they had rarely seen. The procession was solemn and quiet. Alexandra requested chairs for herself and Alexei, complaining of the difficulty standing. 2 chairs were brought in. The room they entered was small, approximately 20 by 16 feet, with a single window that had been covered. The walls featured decorative wallpaper in a diamond pattern. The space was empty, except for the 2 chairs. The family arranged themselves, Nicholas standing with Alexei seated beside him, Alexandra in the other chair, their 4 daughters standing behind, and their 4 loyal servants, Dr. Botkin, maid Anna Demidova, cook Ivan Karitanov, and valet Alexei Trupp, positioned at the back. As they settled in, perhaps wondering why they had been brought to this austere room in the middle of the night, Yurovsky left briefly. He returned minutes later with the execution squad. 11 armed men filing into the already crowded space. The atmosphere instantly shifted from confusion to tension. Yurovsky pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and made a brief announcement. In view of the fact that your relatives continue their offensive against Soviet Russia, the Ural Executive Committee has decided to execute you. The statement was so unexpected, so at odds with the pretext for bringing them downstairs, that Nicholas reportedly had only enough time to utter, "What?" before Yurovsky raised his Colt pistol and fired directly at the former emperor's chest. This first shot was the signal. In an instant, the small room erupted into chaos and gunfire. What should have been a quick clinical execution instead descended into a scene of nightmarish disorder. The basement room, never designed for such purpose, became a smoke-filled chamber of confusion and horror. As soon as Yurovsky fired the first shot at Nicholas, the rest of the execution squad opened fire. Their orders had been specific. Each man was assigned a particular victim to ensure no one was missed. But in the confined space, with the deafening sound of gunfire reverberating off the walls and thick smoke quickly filling the room, discipline collapsed almost immediately. Some of the executioners, possibly intoxicated and certainly nervous about their grim task, fired wildly. Bullets ricocheted off the walls. Men shot past their intended targets, hitting others, or even grazing fellow executioners in the chaos. Making matters worse was an unexpected complication: jewelry. Fearing their valuables would be confiscated during relocation, the Romanov women had sewn diamonds, emeralds, and other precious gems into their clothing, effectively creating rudimentary bulletproof vests. When bullets struck these hidden caches, they deflected in unpredictable directions, adding to the confusion. The initial volley left Nicholas dead almost instantly. Alexandra and Dr. Botkin also fell quickly, but horrifyingly, many of the younger Romanovs remained alive, protected partially by the jewels and partially by the panicked, inaccurate shooting of their executioners. As the smoke temporarily cleared, Yurovsky and his men realized with shock that their task was unfinished. Several victims were still moving or moaning on the floor. What had been planned as a quick execution was becoming a drawn-out nightmare. The executioners, now desperate to complete their grim assignment, resorted to bayonets and the butts of their rifles. The scene that followed was one of chaotic brutality. Yurovsky later reported having to fire additional point-blank shots to ensure death. The entire episode, planned to take perhaps 2 minutes, stretched to over 20. When it was finally over, 11 bodies lay on the blood-soaked floor of the basement room. The executioners, many visibly shaken by what had just occurred, stepped outside for air and vodka while Yurovsky assessed the situation. The bodies were wrapped in bedsheets and carried out to a waiting truck. The initially simple plan, to dispose of the remains down a mineshaft, would prove nearly as chaotic as the execution itself. Outside, the night was warm and cloudy. The truck drove through deserted streets, heading for an abandoned mine called the Four Brothers in dense forest outside Yekaterinburg. There, the bodies were stripped of remaining valuables, revealing the full extent of the hidden jewelry, diamonds, pearls, and gold worth millions in today's currency. But the mine shaft proved too shallow for Yurovsky's purposes. Fearing the bodies might be discovered, especially with White Army forces approaching, he ordered them removed the following night and sought a deeper location for burial. Eventually, they found a spot in the forest where the ground was soft enough to dig a pit. To prevent identification, they poured sulfuric acid on the faces and attempted to burn 2 of the bodies, likely those of Alexei and one of his sisters. After hastily burying the remains, they covered the area with railroad ties to disguise any evidence of disturbed earth. The Romanovs, once among the most recognized and photographed people in the world, had vanished into an unmarked grave in the Russian forest. The morning after the execution, Yurovsky telegraphed his superiors. "Tell Sverdlov the whole family has suffered the same fate as its head. Officially, the family will die during the evacuation." This cryptic message initiated one of the 20th century's most sustained historical cover-ups. Within days, the official Soviet press released a carefully crafted announcement. Nicholas Romanov has been executed by order of the Ural Regional Soviet, while his family has been evacuated to a secure location. This partial truth, acknowledging only the Tsar's death while implying the survival of his family, served immediate political purposes. It presented the Bolsheviks as having eliminated the symbol of the old regime, while avoiding the potential international backlash from executing women and children. The deception continued for years. When White Army investigator Nicholas Sokolov reached Yekaterinburg days after the city's capture, he found the Ipatiev house abandoned, but containing crucial evidence: bullet holes and bayonet marks in the basement walls, jewelry and personal items overlooked in the hasty cleanup, and witnesses who had observed suspicious activities on the night of July 16th. Sokolov eventually located the first burial site at the Four Brothers mine shaft, recovering over 60 pieces of evidence, including charred bone fragments, jewelry, and parts of clothing. Based on this evidence, he concluded the entire family had been murdered and their bodies destroyed with fire and acid. His report, published in 1924, became the first comprehensive account of the Romanovs' fate. But without bodies, doubts persisted. The Soviet government maintained its silence, neither confirming nor denying Sokolov's findings. This information vacuum spawned one of history's most pervasive conspiracy theories: that some of the Romanovs, particularly the young Grand Duchess Anastasia, had somehow survived the execution. Over the following decades, more than 200 people worldwide claimed to be surviving Romanov children. The most famous, Anna Anderson, maintained until her death in 1984 that she was Anastasia, having allegedly escaped the basement with the help of a compassionate guard. Despite being debunked by later DNA testing, her claim captured public imagination and inspired numerous books and films. The Soviet government's position evolved over time. After initially announcing only Nicholas's execution, they later claimed the family had been killed by local Bolsheviks without Moscow's approval. Secret Soviet archives contained the truth, including Yurovsky's detailed account of the execution and disposal of the bodies, but these remained inaccessible to historians and the public. Even the execution site itself was systematically erased. The Ipatiev house, after briefly serving as a museum of the revolution, was demolished in 1977 on the orders of Boris Yeltsin, then the local Communist Party leader, to prevent it from becoming a pilgrimage site for monarchist sympathizers. The truth began to emerge only as the Soviet Union itself was collapsing. In 1979, amateur historians Alexandra Avdonin and Geli Ryabov had actually located what they believed to be the burial site, using Yurovsky's secret notes. Fearing political repercussions, they kept this discovery secret until 1991, exactly when the Soviet system was dissolving. In July 1991, the grave was officially exhumed, revealing the remains of 9 people. But 2 bodies were conspicuously missing, those of Alexei and one of his sisters, most likely Maria. This partial discovery only deepened the mystery. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to the Romanov family and their servants. Samples were compared with living relatives, including Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, whose grandmother was Nicholas II's aunt. On July 17, 1998, exactly 80 years after their execution, the identified remains were given a formal burial in St. Petersburg's Peter and Paul Cathedral, the traditional resting place of Russian emperors. The case wasn't fully resolved until 2007, when amateur archaeologists discovered burned bone fragments about 70 meters from the main burial site. DNA testing confirmed these were the remains of Alexei and the missing daughter, solving the final piece of the puzzle. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the Romanovs as passion bearers, saints who faced death with Christian dignity. Today, the church on the blood stands on the site of the Ipatiev house, marking the location where the last Russian imperial family met their end. The Romanov story resonates through history because it captures something profound about the 20th century itself: how quickly established order can collapse, how ideological certainty can justify extreme actions, and how thoroughly the victors can rewrite history. The basement room of the Ipatiev house stands as one of history's most tragic spaces, a place where a family that once ruled 1/6 of the Earth's surface was reduced to 11 bodies on a bloody floor, their dreams, fears, and futures extinguished in gunfire and confusion. Should the Romanovs have been spared, or was their execution inevitable? Was it necessary revolutionary justice, or an act of unnecessary cruelty that tainted the revolution itself? History rarely offers simple answers to such questions, but in understanding the Romanovs' fate, how they lived, how they died, and how the truth about their deaths was suppressed, we gain insight into the larger forces that shape the modern world, forces that continue to echo through our politics and societies today. Thank you for watching Nefarious History. Please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you stories from history's darkest corners.